My name is Anil Agrawal. I'm president of Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa. And that's a task I've been doing for almost 1 year. And I am committed for 2 more years. I'm trying to find an alternative, but first let us acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We express our deep gratitude for the privilege to meet here and honor their enduring connection to this land. I'm pleased to introduce the esteemed members of the board of the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa. First, we have 2 emeritus members, Dr. Kanta Marwa, who could not be here today, and we have Dr. Jagmohan Umar, Order of Canada recipient. He is the founder of the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa. In fact, he and I started this organization together way back in 2009. Prior to that, we ran the Mahatma Gandhi Society for 3 years. So we have been pursuing those activities. And all our activities are on our website. And website's name is very intuitive, gandhiji.ca. Yeah. And the contributions of Dr. Marwa and Dr. Humar have been instrumental in shaping our work. And we thank you very much. I also want to recognize Rajesh Jain, who could not be here. He's sick today. He's our vice president. Amy Dillon, who is sitting here, our secretary. Prish Gupta, our treasurer. And our distinguished board members, Dr. Noel Salmond, the second from left here. Mamta Datta Mukherjee, who could not attend. She said she will be coming in the beginning. I don't see her yet. And Dr. Sushil Kumar, PhD DLit, very learned man. I sincerely thank you all for your commitment and dedication. Today's event, the M.K. Gandhi Annual Lecture, it holds a special significance. This endowment lecture was initiated in 2012 through the generous contributions of 7 people. Dr. Kanta Marwa, Dr. Nishit Goyal, Dr. Jagmohan Humar, Dr. Pradeep Merchant, the late Mr. Kailash Mittal, Dr. Vasant Parelia, who is present with us today there, and Mr. Jack Uppal. So with their contribution, we set up an endowment fund here in Carleton University, and this lecture is the contribution due to that. We are profoundly grateful for the vision and generosity of these donors who contributed to the endowment fund at Carleton University to hold this annual lecture in collaboration with the College of the Humanities. We are in the premises of the College of the Humanities, and this room is their contribution to the event. Today's lecture, From Ahimsa to Activism, Gandhi's Principles in the Canadian Context. Very right topic. It's insightful and inspiring. We are honored to welcome Dr. Alex Damm as our speaker. He is a scholar at Wilfrid Laurier University. He has significantly contributed to Gandhian studies, mainly through his book. This is his book, Gandhi in a Canadian Context, Relationship between Mahatma Gandhi and Canada. His work illuminates the profound ways in which Gandhi's principles of nonviolence, peace, and social justice continue to resonate within Canadian society. We are also delighted to have Dr. Noel Salmond, a respected scholar of religious studies at Carleton University. Dr. Salmond will lead the panel discussion following the lecture. To our audience, thank you all for joining us today. Your presence enriches this event and reminds us of the enduring relevance of Gandhi's teachings in today's world. May I now invite Dr. Noel Salmond to introduce our distinguished speaker and lead today's discussion. Thank you.
Well, greetings, everyone. It's really a pleasure to see you in this Humanities lecture theater where I work daily. But to have you here on the weekends. Very nice. So I'm really happy to have the privilege to introduce Dr. Alex Damm. Alex did his PhD at the University of Toronto, actually on Christian origins, but has had a long interest in Indian culture. His wife is from India, and Alex lives in Brampton, which is maybe it's the Peter Bhumi of Canada, or India in Canada. And Alex has taught a course at Wilfrid Laurier University in the past on Gandhi, including an online version of that. And so he will share with us, I suppose in a sense, in some ways, a synopsis of the essays in his work, Gandhi in a Canadian context. But the way and then after that, I will make a few remarks based on my teaching a course on Gandhi here at Carleton. And then I also want to make a few remarks about talking about Gandhi today, 2024. Things have changed, you know, but I think it's a very opportune time to be reflecting on Gandhi at this moment. So when Alex has completed his lecture, I'll say a few words, and then our main intention, though, is to have a conversation with all of us in this room, and because I think this is the main purpose of the university, is to provide a site, a space where people can gather and discuss things, maybe sometimes controversial things, but in a civil manner. That's the ideal vision of the university. So we very much like to have a conversation with all of you, rather than this simply being a lecture only, and then a very attenuated Q&A. So that's what we have in store, and so I welcome Alex Damm.
Thanks, Noel. I wanted to say right off the bat how grateful I am to be here amongst people who care about Gandhi and his relevance for Canadian life. It's a treat to be here. It's a treat to be with you. I am merely, I think, chronicling or summarizing some of the much harder work that so many of you have engaged in over the years. And so what I hope to share is something of the connections that have emerged between Gandhi on the one hand and Canadian life on the other, bearing in mind that I actually play a very small role in that, and I'm actually very, very much one with you in spirit here in appreciation for the number of ways in which Gandhi remains relevant to Canadian life. I think this modest talk, which is based on a modest collection of essays from a conference in Waterloo, is to observe that in small ways but powerful ways, Gandhi remains quite relevant to Canadian life. And my hope is to show that critical reflection on Gandhi and emulation of Gandhi, or at least willingness to listen to him, matters very much in Canada and continues to matter here. Gandhi has what I might call a small presence, but a vital presence in Canadian life. And that's the underlying theme of today. And I think that maybe the best way to organize all of these thoughts about Gandhi in Canada is to suggest that, on the one hand, Canada proved to be a useful country and idea to Gandhi, while on the other hand, Gandhi has also proven very useful to and admired to Canada. So there's something of a reciprocal relationship or a symbiosis between Gandhi and Canada that I hope I can draw out a little bit today. In going forward, perhaps the best place to start looking at the connections between Gandhi and Canada is, and this surprised me a little bit when I first learned this, but on the one hand, Gandhi knew quite a bit about Canada, and in fact, I would suggest that Canada was both useful and at times was problematic in Gandhi's eyes. In some ways, Canada had an appeal to Gandhi during his life, which struck me, and in other ways, Canada was something of a problem, an issue for Gandhi during his lifetime. So maybe we can look at this at this side for a few minutes, and tease out a few of the ways in which Canada actually mattered to Gandhi from about 1900 or so, right through the end of his life in the 1940s. I think a first trajectory worth knowing is that there were several Canadians who actively helped Gandhi during the peak of his career. I never knew that, but Gandhi's works reveal that he respected and befriended and knew several Canadians who were fascinated by Ahimsa, by Indian nationalism, and so on, as early as the 1920s. There were several Canadian citizens who, on their own, had donated to or had even spent time with Gandhi in India, and most of these people who came from Canada to assist or contribute to Gandhi's projects remain unnamed, and yet there are some names that emerge in Gandhi's letters. Often in passing, we hear of one Mr. Anderson, Miss Helen Reed, and a correspondent simply named Mildred, all from Canada, to whom Gandhi writes a letter of thanks for a donation. They had supported his ashram work in places like Ahmedabad and so on. And even as early as about 1905, I think, Gandhi had befriended and corresponded with a Canadian member of Parliament, Sir William Wedderburn, who showed some sympathy, high-placed as he was, showed some sympathy to the Indian National Congress and its work in India. So there's this quiet but pulsating dialogue that goes on between individual Canadians, maybe as many as there are in the room, maybe less, and Gandhi himself. And this goes on for many years. So there are people who are quietly interested in ahimsa, in nonviolent action, in interfaith dialogue, in all of that stuff. And this goes on from an early point, from the 1920s through the 1940s. Of course, Gandhi's collected works reveal this trend. If you read through them, you start seeing these connections of mainly Anglo-Canadians corresponding with him or alluded to by him. But there was an interest and several friendships that Gandhi had with individual Canadians. So that's one way in which I think Canada mattered to Gandhi, was some of the individual Canadian supporters that he had. But maybe more significantly, and again, it came as a surprise to me because we don't tend to talk about this in political science. We don't tend to hear this much when we think of Gandhi. But Gandhi saw Canada as something of a political model, something of a template for what India could become in its independence. And that fascinated me because I never thought before that Canada could be a model for India. I often think of it the other way around. But for Gandhi, there was a period, and it's not a long period, but there's a period between about 1917 or so and the mid-1920s, just after he returns from South Africa to India, where Canada becomes something of a yardstick for measuring how India could function as an independent British dominion within the empire. If I can quote briefly from one of Gandhi's letters to this effect, Gandhi says the following in one of his news articles. He says, "We can benefit by our connection with the British only if we live as their friends or their partners. The British will protect the honor of their allies and they will be loyal to them unto death. Why then should we think of breaking off our connection with Britain altogether? We, as Indians, aspire to independence on this basis. In this context, the examples of Australia and Canada are generally cited. We demand a status like theirs. Canadians enjoy protection and likewise help in the defense effort. That is exactly what we want for ourselves." So from an early point, Gandhi is looking to Canada, or at least Canada of the 1920s, as the kind of autonomous, self-governing dominion, at least in its internal affairs, that could be developed in India itself. And that struck me in reading Gandhi's collected works. I should say, Gandhi went on in the 1930s particularly to see the Canadian model of being an autonomous British dominion as inadequate. He believed there should be a more thoroughgoing independence, a sort of equality, a partnership within the empire among countries like India, Australia, and Canada, and Britain. But there was a time in the 20s where Gandhi saw Canada's status as being a political model for India. So for Gandhi, Canada and Canadians had made some memorable impressions from an early date. But I should add to that, too, that Canada also kind of casts a dark shadow for Gandhi. From a very early point, Gandhi's very clear about problems he sees in the Canadian Dominion. And that really centers on anti-Asian racism in Canada. Between about 1908, as I say here, and 1917, before he returns to India from South Africa, Gandhi knew that British-Canadian immigration policy, and we know this too, Canada's immigration policy used very much to aim to craft Canada into a sort of Little England with English values, English culture, English people, English schools, residential schools to make natives and indigenous peoples conform to English values, and so on and so on. And in newspapers like Indian Opinion, Gandhi openly criticized Canada's immigration policy for the restrictions it set on Indian immigrants. Many of you will know that by the turn of the century, around 1900, there were thousands of Punjabi immigrants working in what's now British Columbia. And there were others in other parts of Canada. And what upset Gandhi was the conditions that they faced living here and sometimes the bars that it required just to get in, to stay in Canada as an immigrant, when in theory, as a citizen of the empire, you should be able to move anywhere as an equal in the British Empire. And in practice, that wasn't the case. If I could quote Gandhi himself to this end, in 1908, I think this is from Indian Opinion, he wrote an article called Rhodesia Indians. And he explained that, quote, the same harsh treatment that is our lot here in South Africa is being meted out to Indians in Canada. And by harsh treatment, Gandhi's referring to the discriminatory immigration policies applied to Indian immigrants. One illustration that comes to mind is the sad case of the Komagata Maru, which probably you already know of, in which Canadian officials blocked the Komagata Maru with many, many Indian immigrants, and they made the ship turn around, and they made it return eventually to Calcutta, and that still, rightly, is a sore point and a sad spot in Canada's immigration policy. So at times, Gandhi was disappointed in Canada. But if I can summarize this first dimension, I think Gandhi's disappointments with Canada, they don't take away from the fact that Gandhi, for a time, has a very positive image of Canada. Indeed, of Canada as a model for Indian independence. So, there you have it. On the one hand, Canada matters to Gandhi, which is something we don't usually think about in Gandhian studies. On the other hand, and I think there's more to say on this side of the equation, Gandhian thinking, etc., has proven very useful to Canada for decades. And this is really salutary. And what I'd like to suggest is that Gandhi's been positively received in Canada by Canadians, I think, in two big ways. The first is Gandhi's presence in education. And when I say education, there have been and there continue to be some active efforts to expose children to consciousness raising about Gandhi. I think, for example, of the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Foundation in Edmonton, Alberta. That goes on. But what I'm thinking of more is post-secondary education, university lecture halls, where Gandhi has been positively received here and has proven useful for decades and decades. And I just hope to tease that theme out a little bit with some illustration. For one, Gandhi has had an abiding presence in post-secondary or university education, in a presence that some would say is small, but abiding. Small, but thriving. Small, but meaningful in Canadian universities. And the first illustration of that fact is that several Canadian universities have and still have post-secondary courses on the life and thought of Gandhi. Canadian academics across the country also have maintained a fairly rich research profile on Gandhi and of issues connected to him. An essay by Harold Coward, who's long been familiar with scholarship on India and Canada, points out that there are university courses, undergrad courses on Gandhi at universities like McGill University, Wilfrid Laurier University, and thanks to the dedication of Noel Salmond and others here, Gandhi courses at Carleton University. And oftentimes, it's beyond that. Coward has shown that there are many, many university courses in Canada which, while they're not dedicated to Gandhi, they're not titled Gandhi, they are built around modules that contain Gandhi. Courses on Hindu tradition and nonviolence, courses on peace and conflict, courses on Hinduism. So Gandhi pops up in these different contexts in university studies and gives undergraduates something of an exposure to his thinking. So for one, there are several university courses and modules in Canada now, or at least in the last 7 or 8 years when this was published. There are university teaching modules on Gandhi. There's rich research also on him. A second point may be worth making about Gandhi in the university scene in Canada is that although limited in quantity, there has been some reflection by students themselves, by university students, on Gandhi's significance for their own lives and for their decision making. At least if I read a survey study that was done by Kay Copadre, a retired professor from Wilfrid Laurier University, she sent in the mail questionnaires to all her former students she could find who took her course on Gandhi and said, "Did you remember anything? What did you remember? What did you like?" and so on. And Copadre found, when she surveyed, that more than a few undergrad students, young folks, despite their busy lives, despite all the stuff that goes on for young people, they had continued to reflect on and even to be informed by certain Gandhian principles: nonviolence, dialogue, Ahimsa, respect for difference. I'll quote from Copadre, who says that more than a few former students mentioned that they continued to reflect on Gandhi's views of nonviolence, his techniques of conflict transformation, and his larger pronouncements on human potential for positive change. Even former students who admitted they had never drawn upon Gandhi's strategies for personal or interpersonal change stated that they still contemplated Gandhi's ideas. They still thought about him. Somewhere, she says, Gandhi's ideas had struck a chord. Otherwise, students would not still be pondering them from time to time. So students learn about Gandhi, and students are thinking about Gandhi, sometimes at least, in Canada. A third trajectory in post-secondary education here is that in some Gandhi courses, the very fact of having a university introduction to Gandhi has allowed for a healthy range of issues to be brought up in class, issues about contemporary life and politics. And here I'm thinking of in particular, of a course on Gandhi that was been offered for over 40 years by Professor Paul Younger of McMaster University. Younger taught a course on Gandhi from 1969 all the way to 2007, every other year. So he was there in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and in the 2000s. And Younger argues that in each decade, the Gandhi course helped to foreground or to bring up issues of concern to the students. In the 1970s, for example, the Gandhi course offered rich grounds for discussing feminism, which is a theme, women's rights in Gandhi's writings. In the early 2000s, after the 9/11 debacle, especially Muslim students found rich ground for discussing nonviolence and dialogue, again, a key theme in Gandhi's writings. So it's as if in Gandhi courses, current affairs has this way of coming into the classroom and using Gandhi as a basis for discussing and learning about constructive approaches to women's rights, to nonviolence, to culture, and so on. So Gandhi becomes a kind of a charger for the discussion of important issues in each decade. In fact, and I'll say this as a fourth trajectory of university education, there are places where some Canadian undergraduates here even have had the opportunity to emulate Gandhi directly in the practice of conflict resolution. And here I'm thinking of an internship program at McMaster University, which is facilitated by Prime Minister Lester Pearson's granddaughter, Anne Pearson, and which allows Canadian undergraduates to work in a Gandhian-inspired brigade in India called the Mahila Shanti Sena. Many female students under Pearson's direction have worked with the so-called Women's Peace Brigade in places like Bihar, and have had a first-hand chance to watch how women in India are taking initiative in non-violently addressing problems of spousal violence, alcohol abuse, and so on the ground level. So there are Canadian students going to India, emulating Gandhi, and that's significant, that Canadian students are attracted to some of his direct action. So Gandhi has proven useful to Canadians in post-secondary education. There's a lot of absorbing and reflection on Gandhi in places like this. And that's worth, this is one of the positive receptions of Gandhi in Canada. At the same time, Gandhi has proven useful to Canada not only in the university, but really out in the community more generally, in that many Canadians still regard, and this is very salutary, that many Canadians still regard Gandhi's ethos, Gandhi's example as deeply relevant to being Canadian today. Gandhi is not a sort of a dead figure. He is, more than we might think, a kind of ongoing inspiration for Canadians and Canadian life. He remains relevant. And to tease out that relevance, I thought it might help to point out first that there are many Gandhian subjects or themes for emulation in Canada. Much of what Gandhi stood for in his life has been picked up, practiced, tested, admired by Canadians across the country. Themes from Gandhi's life to which you would need no introduction, like his personal courage, his emphasis on nonviolence as a way of seeing the world, dialogue, pluralism, honesty, and holding governments to account for how they treat marginalized peoples. all of these themes in Gandhi have been paid attention to, partly because of university training, by Canadian citizens. Indeed, if I can pass to a second point, there is an activism in Canada, a quiet, maybe muted activism, wise activism, but still activism in Canada, consciousness raising in Canada on Gandhi's thinking that's taking many forms. I think, for example, of Gandhi Peace Councils, like the Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa. I think of Gandhi festivals, like the Gandhi Peace Festival of Hamilton, directed by Professor Rama Singh at McMaster, which has done so much, as you have here, to raise consciousness about nonviolence and dialogue as ways of life. There are, of course, also many Gandhi symbols that symbolize our engagement with Gandhi's ideas. There are busts of Gandhi, one in Hamilton. There are statues of Gandhi, of course. One beautiful statue, which the council has worked so hard here to create at Carleton, even in Winnipeg, even in a stained glass window in Saskatoon. You will find images of Gandhi, which means people are thinking. People are thinking. Maybe not many, but enough to show that Gandhi remains vital. And I think, and this is a sort of final comment, Gandhi's usefulness to his relevance in Canada is most evident in the fact that the problems about which Gandhi thought in his age are problems that are recurring and relevant in Canada still today. Issues for Gandhi, in some ways, are now our issues too. And so Gandhi remains a relevant approach to solving those problems or addressing those issues. Gandhi offers, and you would know this as well or better than I do, a constructive focus on and discussion of abiding problems that require the application of nonviolence. These problems include, in Canada today, corporate and political exploitation of the working class, environmental exploitation, the cultural celebration of verbal and physical aggression and militarism, ignorance of the needs of those less fortunate in favor of smugness and self-entitlement. The issues go on and on. The same issues that Gandhi could see in the power establishment of colonial India are still issues here. And so, application of Gandhi's thinking was not only relevant in colonial India, but it remains relevant here. And that can take so many salutary forms. Nonviolent direct action is a dramatic example of Gandhian principles. But the simple willingness to think nonviolently about the person who antagonizes you, about the person who doesn't listen to you, about your consumption and how that affects other living things, about how your vote matters in promoting a humane Canada over a militaristic Canada. All of these little events and issues can be addressed through that abiding attention to nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of thinking. So I think, and I think you think, rightly, that Gandhi's thinking is as timely today here as it was decades ago in other parts of the British Empire. So at the risk of sounding repetitive, to sum up, I hope that I've shown some abiding relationships between Gandhi and Canada. On the one hand, that Canada matters to Gandhi and is taken up by him. And on the other hand, that Gandhi matters to Canadians and that his thoughts and principles are taken up by us. And it's a real credit to him that we can even stand here and say this today. And thanks to being who you are, that you keep those thoughts, those concerns in daily life going for Canadians and for setting the right example today. So again, I'd like you to remember the good that you're doing, and I want to thank you also for taking the trouble to be here, for generously inviting me to talk briefly about Gandhi in this country, and for being a living model of Ahimsa in your everyday lives. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, Alex. Really nice overview of what's been happening, especially in academia, in Canada in relation to Gandhi. So I'll try to be brief here. I was thinking not too long ago, what could I possibly say about Gandhi in 2024, given our current situation, given the war in the Middle East, given the devastation in Gaza, given the war in Ukraine, given here in Canada that relations between Canada and India are at an all-time low, as everybody knows. So it's I think, well, okay, but then where does Gandhi fit in all of it? Is Gandhi does Gandhi have a meaningful place given the violence in the world, and given another thing, of course, given what happened recently south of the border, where someone, in my view, oriented almost exclusively to kama and artha, with almost no orientation to dharma or moksha, has been elected the leader of the world in this unbelievable development. So what are we as admirers, or maybe some of us as critics of Gandhi, to make of what he stood for in light of current realities? So I would like us all to engage with that in a moment. So I think for some people, the answer would be, well, Gandhi's values of ahimsa are just hopelessly naive, outdated, utopian, idealistic, and unrealistic given realpolitik, the realities of the serious political life. And so I think it's a challenge for us right now. I mean, of course, personally, and I think probably most of us, maybe all of us in this room, do see Gandhi as supremely relevant in this moment, but it's maybe a challenge to convey that to others, because maybe this whole thing about ahimsa, and all of that is just unreal given the state of the world. So what I want to keep my remarks short, but one thing I want to pick up from you, Alex, has to do with Gandhi in the academy, in the university, and I'll give you a bit of an update on that. I haven't taught a course on Gandhi here at Carleton in a number of years, but every year I do come in and do a lecture in the 4th year of the Humanities program where my colleague, Professor Farhan Rajoy, has the book Hind Swaraj on the curriculum, on the reading list for that course, and along with Salman Rushdie, Indian author, and Edward Said's book Orientalism. But they do read Hind Swaraj, and I come in and do a class on that with them. I hope to be able to go back to teaching a full course on Gandhi down the road, but we'll see. But I think things are different now than they were even 10 years ago, or certainly 20 or 30 years ago. One thing, very simply, the Richard Attenborough blockbuster film on Gandhi has disappeared from the I mean, no 18-year-old or 21-year-old student knows about that film. I mean, that was a powerful vehicle for bringing Gandhi into the public sphere in a country like Canada, but that's gone. And instead, I find with some alarm that there are murky critiques of Gandhi circulating internationally on the internet. And of course, one of the challenges we have right now is, you know, misinformation, disinformation, not to mention AI, totally disrupting higher education. But I wanted to mention a few of these. And they also appeared here at Carleton when we put up the statue of Gandhi back in 2011. There was an American Sikh former military doctor who agitated against a Gandhi statue coming to Ottawa, and then from a distance he agitated against it here at Carleton. And then that blew over, nothing really happened with that. But then later, I guess that's going back 6 or 7 years, we had a graduate student in African studies here at Carleton launched a bit of a campaign to take down the Gandhi statue here on the campus. And both of those individuals promoted critical stances toward Gandhi that you can find on the internet. And so they're, to my mind, unbelievably simplistic and over the top, but here they go. There's sort of 4 areas where these critiques are launched. When Gandhi was a racist, you know, and it's true that when Gandhi was a young lawyer in South Africa, he made some unfortunate comments about black South Africans, and he wanted to have Indian prisoners not in the same cell blocks as African. This is true, but I think that hardly detracts from Gandhi's contributions. But this is one of the memes that are floating out there on the internet. Secondly, oh, Gandhi was not only a racist, he was an imperialist. He supported Britain in the Zulu rebellion, and he had a volunteer ambulance corps, and they would take the wounded off the battlefield. And that was actually one of the things that radicalized Gandhi in terms of nonviolence, that experience of being a stretcher bearer and, in South Africa. But that is then manipulated or morphed into some kind of claim that Gandhi was an imperialist, and then of course, he did support the recruitment effort of the British during World War I, but hardly, I think, it's such an inversion when you think of Gandhi as the archetypal anti-imperialist achieving the independence of India from Britain, to then flip this into saying he's an imperialist is one of the strange fruits of the internet. And then, another one, Gandhi was a sexual abuser. This is the reference to his experiments with brahmacharya. And any of us who studied Gandhi know that this is a fact, that yes, he did experiment with brahmacharya. No one, including his niece, ever claims there was abuse in that. It was a fairly strange program, maybe, but to call that abusive, I think, is way out of court. And then finally, Gandhi was a defender of caste. And here you get the Ambedkarites, and also a writer I personally love and admire, Arundhati Roy, who wrote a long new introduction to Dr. Ambedkar's Annihilation of Caste. It's a longer introduction than the actual text of the volume, the new edition of that book came out. What I find is that the students have never seen the Richard Attenborough Gandhi film. They've never read anything from Gandhi, but they have somehow picked up on these critiques that are circulating on the internet. So that I find interesting, but also somewhat disturbing. In terms of these critiques, in some ways they circulate in what some people would dismiss as a sort of woke culture. But I personally feel that if this is the case, then this is progressive people shooting themselves in their own foot, because I think that these critiques are inaccurate and unfair, but they have a presence, and so I think it behooves those of us who are in the academy to air them, bring them to the surface, and critique them. So, but I also think I'll end with this, that there seems to be a program across the board in our culture, to want to topple people from their pedestals, right? Bring down the mighty from their thrones, but or to demystify or debunk great figures. And some of that is, I think, a useful task, but sometimes it's just really unfortunate. But maybe it's related to a tendency in some circles to divinize Gandhi, to make him an absolutely perfect being. Well, he was the Mahatma, he was the great soul, but he himself resisted any attempts to divinize him during his lifetime, and he spoke at length in his autobiography of his Himalayan blunders. And actually I have, I have a copy of the autobiography, and I share this with students in his introduction. He's talking about his experiments with truth, and he says, even my Himalayan blunders have seemed trifling to me because I kept strictly to this path of satya, truth. And then at the last page of his introduction to his autobiography, he says, I hope to acquaint the reader fully with all my faults and errors. My purpose is to describe experiments in the science of satyagraha, not to say how good I am. So Gandhi admitted his own shortcomings, and he made mistakes in his experiments. To my mind, that adds to his greatness, does not detract from it. But I think that this is something that I'd like us maybe now to, if we can, have a little dialogue on the current reception of Gandhi, misinformation about Gandhi, or the sort of the name is familiar, maybe the image is somewhat familiar as a trope or a meme, but not much else. So I'll come to you just in a second, but I'll maybe start by inviting you, Alex, if you have any reflections on that, the current state of knowledge or lack thereof of Gandhi and his program.
I think in present we're in something of a difficult time regarding the imbibing of or learning from Gandhi, and for two reasons at least. One of them, and I don't mean to sound hypercritical, but youth principally youth, have a problem attending to the written word and sustaining attention to one subject at a time, particularly if that's not packaged to appeal to the visual and auditory senses. I work as a teacher now in the Catholic School Board in Dufferin Peel, and something's changed with regards to youth being able to sustain attention on written texts and thereby learn something or think quietly about its value. So that's one factor. Technology, I think, is making young people less patient. I don't mean to sound dismissive. There are a lot of wonderful, committed, passionate young people who are ready to read in depth about Gandhi, but paying attention to ideas that matter is a problem, I think, for some youth. And second, some people, particularly in North America, who are supporters of the current political the current political configuration in India, the Bharatiya Janata Party, have, I think, tried to refashion some Indian symbols, including Gandhi, including also Swami Vivekananda. They've turned or subtly tried to convert those and what they stand for into the service of a more muscular India. I always was under the impression that part of India's unparalleled strength was Gandhi's insistence upon nonviolent conflict resolution. And India has shown time and again beautifully how it can work. But I worry about the appropriation and the use and misuse of Gandhi and others for political agendas, the creation of enormous statues of particular Congress figures who suit or match a current agenda in India, the scorn that is, and often in political circles in India, the current governing regime, there are members of parliament who absolutely heap scorn upon Gandhi and upon close associates like Pandit Nehru as having been almost traitors. And so that concerns me. So in the reception of Gandhi, there are political interests of some in India at present who are, I think, inhibiting a proper understanding of Gandhi, and there are technological interests, especially in North America, that are inhibiting reception of Gandhi and of other thoughtful thinkers.
Yes.
I have a comment and a question, and it's addressed to both of you. But before that, may I say something? I have seen Attenborough's Gandhi, but much more importantly, as a 6-year-old boy in 1947, I was taken to one of his prayer meetings, so I have seen him in the flesh. I think a 6-year-old boy does not understand the concept of darshan, but I have seen him in the flesh. I was there on the 30th of January when he was assassinated. Okay, that's not relevant to the question. The question is this. 2,300 years ago, the Greek historian Thucydides said, "The strong do what they will, the weak endure what they must." If we are living in that kind of a world, then you tell me how Gandhiji's ideas since his death in 1948 can be applied. The second part of the question is this. Why has there been no figure in Canada corresponding to Martin Luther King who has tried to apply his ideas to a major social problem? These are two sort of unrelated, but in my mind. Canadian questions.
That to you. Of course, the second one was, why has there been no figure like Martin Luther King Jr. in Canada? What was the first question?
It goes back to a Greek historian, a very famous Greek historian called Thucydides,
Yes.
who said, the strong do what they will,
Yeah,
the weak endure what they must.
yeah.
Okay? And that's the vision that seems to work in the world of great power politics today.
That's what we call realpolitik.
Yes,
The big fish is
it
the little
was called realpolitik, and Metternich, Kissinger. In fact, the Indians would argue that all of that goes back to the philosopher Chanakya at the time of Chandragupta Maurya.
Yeah, but doesn't that make Gandhi all the more important?
Okay.
I mean, to have some almost counterintuitive vision of another possibility
Exactly.
of being in the world, you know, than simply dog eat dog or big fish eat the little fish, or rule of what's the expression in the danda, rule by the stick, you know.
On the law of the jungle.
Yeah, so to my mind, it makes him, you know, his vision all the more paradoxically or counterintuitively relevant, you know, because, yes, John.
I would just like to follow on what Noel pointed out. The first point was somehow Gandhi's vision and his ideas and principles seem so naive today, irrelevant, too idealistic. My argument is that they are the most relevant in today's world. There's so much conflict and war and bloodshed, and you cannot simply say that these ideas are naive and realistic. Gandhi himself stood in favor of his ideas, against all odds. This is what we need this world to do. Stand up for the rights, and Gandhi was one of them who predicted these things that should happen. That was one part of the question. The other part, of course, is the more local one, where these small tidbits from people come and oppose Gandhi, and we have as council, and as a part of the council for the last since 2006 or 2009, we have seen this ourselves. And they are all misrepresentations, misunderstandings. The opposition to the installation of Gandhi statue at Carleton University, where I was a part of the one who brought the statue from India, donated by the government of India, was quite clear. And this was driven by an ex-colonel of the US Army who happened to be a Sikh, and somehow here the understanding that Gandhi was hated by Sikhs. It's quite contrary to the fact, because the very next year after this protest was marked, we had in contact with Ahimsa, one of the most foremost scholars from Sikh community, and very respected and learned scholar, whose book was inaugurated by the President of India, who wrote very strongly in favor of Gandhi, saying that the Golden Temple was admiring Gandhi. Sikhs he was not against Sikhs in any way. Sikhs were admiring him. There is another Sikh, Khushwant Singh is his name.
Yes.
He is the editor of Hindustan Times, one of the most respected person. He writes strongly in favor of Gandhi. In fact, he writes about the hymn, the Vaishnav Jan, and its translation, and he writes about the translation, the English translation of that hymn. So there is a big misunderstanding. The black students who came up against Gandhi, they didn't realize that Gandhi's first statue was inaugurated in South Africa by Nelson Mandela himself.
Right.
And Nelson Mandela and African ambassador went to, or high commissioners probably, went to India, and they gave in one of their speeches, said, Gandhi was not only the father, he was the grandfather of South Africa. So there's a big misunderstanding among people which drives these little protests here and there. And this is happening not only in Ottawa, it's happening across all Gandhi statues in United States and in Winnipeg by these misinformed people. So I thought I would share that experience with you, because we've seen this ourselves. And Mahip Singh was here in Ottawa. He was at our home. We invited him, and he spoke about Gandhi. Of course, the very fact that he came to us as a guest shows that he had a great respect for Gandhi. So thank you.
Bande mein dam tha.
इस बंदे में था दम।
Bande mein dam tha.
बंदे में दम था।
Yeah, please.
Just to give a little practical example of Gandhi's relevance, I was walking from Pugwash to Halifax and met some Gandhian walkers. It was a 200K walk, and I decided to join them on the west coast of the United States. So that was, the west coast walk was a 500K walk. So we started at ground zero in Washington State, and we had their beautiful sign, and it was, the walk was the Gandhi Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Pilgrimage in the United States. And we were invited back to Seattle because the Indian consulate was unveiling a statue, and you couldn't have a more prominent place in Seattle than where the Gandhi statue is. It is right under the Space Needle in a peace garden there. So a huge celebration with the intention of the Indian consulate having a Gandhi statue in all of the 7 states that he's connected with. And then as we walked down the states, different places, seeing Gandhi statues, and particularly in California too, at 2 universities where they have Gandhi statues in one place in a peace garden with a statue, and a vibrant place enjoyed by the students of Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Cesar Chavez, Jane Addams, and Gandhi, and they're waiting for the First Nations indigenous community to choose who will be the indigenous leader, who will be the next statue there. So, and definitely in all those places I hear about some tension, but in those places where there was this vibrant presence, there was also a real sense of engagement from the students, and they came and they wanted to walk with us and they wanted to talk with us, and so it was really a powerful sense. One just last thing, because also along the walk we were hearing about the very real challenges that the community is presenting, but our most frequent place of being given a place to stay at night, because we just were walking, we needed to have a place to stay at, sleep on the floor, we had our rolls with us, and that were the Sikh Gurdwaras. And the Sikh Gurdwaras, with our Gandhi flag, gave us food to take with us, gave us a place to stay. So, you know, I think for me, the message of nonviolence couldn't be more necessary or more relevant. And in very practical ways, just as I walk, I see how people do relate to it. And they relate to it really strongly. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
I think it's interesting the challenges of a lack of focus or a patience to really attend and dig deep and go profoundly deep in something, and the misinformation, disinformation, deflecting superficial approaches that are grabbing people's attention and really provoking strong emotions in people, and it's an opportunity to engage. If we have, for example, undergraduate courses where students who do think this way, who do approach things at a very superficial level without actually going deep, and who do react strongly and pick up on a meme that is actually, there's a lot of evidence that discredits it, it's actually false information. In an undergraduate course, for example, that's just one example, it's an opportunity to help teach what is critical engagement and what do these principles mean to you. So to start to take people on the experiment with truth journey that Gandhi was on, and help them to come to their own conclusions by actually working with some of these ideas. So engagement is engagement. It can come either way, negative or so. People really engaging because they believe in it and love it, or they really strongly think there's something wrong with it, and digging into what is wrong with it, why is it wrong, what does this mean? So how would you change it? How would you improve it? People come to the same conclusions, hopefully, that Gandhi does when they work with these ideas. That's the beauty of experimenting with them. And we see it even when we ask people not just to engage at a theoretical framework level at the university level, but with activism, when they are starting to see how these ideas can actually make a difference by trying something different. Instead of approaching strong negative energy with strong negative energy and creating that dynamic, approaching with a different energy and helping people to better understand the fate of people who are suffering for whatever reason. So, and it's getting more nuanced now in this postmodern world. But that's good. We want that. It is real. There is suffering all around. We do need to, there isn't a right and a wrong. We do need to tease apart the different dynamics at work, which was what Gandhi very much was doing through all of the work that he did. So I think that as long as we can get engagement, and we do have people who understand and are moving forward with these ideas, it's a good thing. Now, what concerns me is that we're not seeing an introduction to these ideas at the undergraduate level everywhere, or the high school level, or the elementary school level. We should be. It should be just a foundation. But there, I think, is the challenge, to try to help people to see the depth to some of these ideas that they're seeing in different forms, perhaps morphed, perhaps changed into something that isn't as effective as it could be, but that learning has been done, and I think it can be turned around, as long as there's engagement. So strong negative engagement gives the opportunity, as you said, with people understanding, oh, well, he was the grandfather of South Africa, and the depth to which he was supported within South Africa by folks like Nelson Mandela.
Yes, I guess the technology is a mixed blessing. Well, I mean, it has huge pitfalls in terms of
Absolutely.
disinformation, misinformation, and anybody has a pulpit to launch an invective against anyone. On the other hand, it makes primary text very accessible electronically, and maybe you would have reflections on that from the students you teach.
I think what you say is a wonderful refreshment to Gandhian studies at whether it's secondary school or post-secondary school. And I think one of the challenges, and just listening to you speak, is for teachers to bring the best of their craft, understanding how young people think, and pitching the ideas, at least initially, to them in a way that grabs them and doesn't make them roll their eyes and go back to their ephemeral phones. And there are, in teaching literature, there are things like culturally responsive teaching that pay attention to that, about students like the concrete more than the abstract. They like cultural diversity, not just one culture. They like this, they like this. So if a teacher were to pick up the content of a Gandhi course and present it in a way that we know, for better or worse, but it works with young people, there's promise in that.
For things to come together and beautiful things will happen. And we need it. The conditions are such that more and more people are aware of and feeling the injustices and the problems. We're feeling them. We know that because everyone's concerned about the state of the world with climate change and all of the scary things. So now it's just planting the seed for how to navigate these scary things in a way that allows us to stay true to ourselves. And even that question of what does it mean to be true to ourselves is not being asked. So there's so much richness that could come from all of these ideas.
Thank you.
I'm an elementary teacher too, and I think when we are talking about the planting seed, it has to come from elementary. And there is a curriculum this year, and actually not this year, a few years back, they added no bully, right? This perfectly, all these teachings, I was telling Anilji that these teachings fit in that curriculum. It's just we have to bring ministry on. Once there will be less that mindfulness is going on away, and they will come on with these teachings to the kindergarten, grade 1, 2, and up to grade 5 will make a huge difference in the school environment too. And like there are so many people complaining there is bully going on in the school. When everybody will be on the same page, I think these all problems will be gone too. But the planting seed has to come from the soil, which is elementary. Yeah. And that's the kinder up. And kindergarten, they are making, it's making difficult for the teachers too, that it's a play base. But the majority of the kindergarten teachers don't know what is play base. When these things will come in the curriculum, okay, this is you teach truthfulness in a playful manner, that is teaching. And then that will be continued from kinder up, and that will make the difference. If you say high school students, those are already like, you can't mold a brick, but you can mold
That's right.
soil. So it has to come from the bottom.
Yes, please.
So I'll make a comment first and follow the question. Is Gandhian study, principles, values, is it, can we say it's just an academic topic? We studied at universities and schools and so on and so forth, with a tinge of nostalgia, something great that happened so many decades ago. It worked at a certain point in time, in a certain context. Or does it have any practical applicability in today's world? And I think a question was raised in the gentleman at the back. In today's world, a Darwinian world, if I may use that term, where power, strength, defined in many ways, rules the world.
Both politically and socially Darwinian.
Okay. So my question is, a great subject of discussion, but what is the practical applicability and effectiveness of these values today in today's world? I mean, for example, would something like this be applicable in what's going on in the Ukraine-Russia war, or in the Middle East, Gaza-Israel war? Is there any institutional instrument that will take these principles and apply them effectively? That's my question.
Well, I mean, I think obviously the university is a sort of ivory tower, where we dispassionately study old stuff, historical things, and that to some degree has to be preserved. But at the same time, obviously, personally for Gandhi, with Gandhi, it has tremendous applicability, and I'll come back to the war, but the climate situation. Well, Gandhi was inspired by a Jain tradition, where the aparigraha, like non-grasping of material possessions. Well, I think we're all being called to be willing to sacrifice a little bit of our material well-being, pay higher taxes, pay more for energy, pay people who can't afford that energy, subsidize them, redistribute wealth, in order to solve, make progress on the climate issue. And Gandhi is an enormous inspiration in that regard. So, and then on the war footing, if I try to think outside the box of the ivory tower of the university, well, Gandhi is famously credited with saying, that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And his reflections on how violence begets violence, and his questioning if in a case like the Middle East, is there actually a military solution at the end of the day? There has to be a political solution, not a military solution. And so I think Gandhi's relevance there is tremendous, and the whole reflection on is there such a thing as just war? And is there the I mean, Max Weber defined the state as the institution that has the monopoly on the legitimate means of violence. You know? That's what a state is. But Gandhi
The
gives
just
a vision
war
of
is a
an
Christian
alternative
concept,
to
is it not?
violence. Sorry?
The just war is a Christian concept, is it not?
Yes, but you would find equivalents of it elsewhere.
Yeah.
But you know, if you turn to Gandhi, you know, his daily inspiration was the Bhagavad Gita. We all know that.
Exactly.
But if you read the Bhagavad Gita on a literal level, it's a text legitimating warfare. The Pandavas had a just war to go and fight against the evil Kauravas, but Gandhi didn't read it that way. He said, no, the whole thing it's an allegory. It's really about the struggle to become a good person, to overcome, you know, your delusion, greed, and hatred. You know, that's the real battle that the Bhagavad Gita is talking about, not an external battle. That's just a symbol. And Gandhi argued, well, if the author, Vyasa, whoever wrote the Mahabharata, had intended to praise war, the upshot of the great Mahabharata, the war would not have been such a disaster. It was a horrible bloodbath, and then things fell apart. All the Pandava brothers died off one by one. So Gandhi argued, no, it's not, the text is not, in his view, a legitimation of violence. Take that or leave it, but I think in something so intractable as the Israel-Palestine conflict, or maybe to some degree the Ukraine-Russia thing, I don't think clearly Gandhi gives a simple answer, but at least he gives some hoped-for vision of an alternative to simply relying on military force as a solution. So. Hey, please, yeah.
I was taken by your question about how do we stand up in an age where the strongest is just assumed to win, the most beautiful is just assumed to be the best, and it got me thinking that, and I'm only learning this gradually, but the more I look around, I'm reassured by the number of people who are receiving nothing like the publicity that Gandhi received. Something happened in Gandhi's life, owing partly to his Herculean capacity for work and his determination, that he was able to, he would just not back down, starting at the level of petition and letter writing, and he just wouldn't stop until other people saw the truth. So in some ways, Gandhi was, because of that hard work capacity he had, that determination, that makes him a little unusual. But then I'm heartened to see there are people who are taking, in their own way, little facets of nonviolence and applying them in communities around the world in small ways that are heroic like Gandhi, but they sometimes don't get I sometimes am not aware of them because they're going on in a particular place in a world that's distracted and it's not really paying attention to them. But Gandhi had said that after his life, out of his ashes, 1,000 Gandhis would arise. And I wonder if, in a quiet way, 1,000 Gandhis are at work, but they're not getting the attention they deserve from the press. And they're each taking something that they have the capacity to do on a small scale, whether it's land redistribution, recycling, spousal abuse. They're each taking a little element and applying nonviolence. But no one of them stands out like Gandhi did in his time.
But also like Martin Luther King did.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think hopefully, I'd like to think that in the shadow of King and in the shadow of Gandhi, there are several people who are not getting the attention they deserve, but who are quietly transforming the world along nonviolent lines. I like to think that.
Hi, I have a question, actually a couple of them. How much of the choice of non-violence by Gandhi was strategic instead of being rooted in a moral, on a moral footing? So the reason being that the British, the colonial masters, enjoyed outrageous superiority in terms of arms and ammunition over the Indians. So did Gandhi choose non-violence because in his calculus of practicality, that if I go the violent way, my side will lose badly. There is no way that a few militants with guns can confront such a big empire. So instead of going that route, let me rather go the non-violent route. Was that a consideration? That the consideration was rooted on a strategic concern rather than a moral concern. And if it indeed was strategic, then we do have to think that in different contexts,
Exactly.
conflicts can be resolved not necessarily by non-violent means. Sometimes violence is justified. Most, for example, like the one of the camps during the Second World War, where the Jews were genocided, and where one of the Holocaust camps, they were freed by the Soviet Red Army. So eventually, a military campaign was finally able to prevail over evil of the German Nazis. So again, is non-violence actually a strategic result of some strategic considerations, or is it always correct to go the non-violent way?
A very good question.
Well, I think for Gandhi, it's pretty clear that it was not simply strategic. It was a deeply felt commitment, because of course there were freedom fighters in India, including Sri Aurobindo, who were in favor of violent means. Bhagat Singh, yes, and others. But I think Gandhi, and of course we know that Gandhi sometimes called off his satyagraha if he felt that his followers were not perfected in their training in non-violence, and it upset his. So I think in the case of Gandhi, it's not simply strategic. It's deeply personally a commitment. But I think that the question that is often raised, well, Gandhi's strategies were effective because yes, the British had a ruthless imperial rule in India, but they had something of a conscience, something of a heart, and the suffering of the satyagrahis and the courage of the Gandhians could actually affect the hearts, the consciousness of the officials of the Raj, in a way that maybe would be ineffective against Hitler or the Nazis, and the great Jewish thinker Martin Buber, I think, said it was ridiculous for Gandhi to think that satyagraha would work against the Nazis, but I think in terms of Gandhi himself, it was not simply as a kind of skillful means or strategic thing. It was an absolutely firm commitment. Yes.
This is not a question, it's a reflection. You spoke about Ahimsa and activism, and Gandhi brought social and political change. But we forget that he was a spiritual man. He was a spiritual man. All the strength he had was come from the heart, from this. And one of the quotations that I like from Gandhi, he said, "You be the if you want change, you be the change in the world." Now we cannot do great things like Gandhi, but each one of us here, we can start to change our life. We sit and we want other people to change, right? I wait till others change for me to change. So if each one of us start with ourselves, let me do change. Change is passes, it goes, it influences others. Then we can avoid violence in our families. You create unity, so that spread. So for me, Gandhi is a change, and then we can follow that in our lives and in our families, in the community. So when change starts with ourselves, it changes in the community, families first, the community, and the government as a whole.
And the first step in that self-transformation you rightly highlighted is an irreducibly spiritual change. Call it Christian, call it Muslim, call it Hindu, whatever. But it's something that starts deep within and then governs everything you do.
Yeah.
In terms of citizen level activism and engagement, I think that comes from, that's driven by values. And it's that value which implores us to be active, be getting engaged. And I have with me here my colleague Kuzma Tarasov. My name is Balwant Baneja. I'm just mentioning your names because both of us have been very active, along with Jug and others in this, who have been active as a citizen. You know, that's our a great privilege to be in a democracy where we can express ourselves. And that's the group we are talking about, and most of us who are here, or if we are engaged, we're driven by those Gandhian values. Those are Satya, Dharma, Prema, Shanti, and Ahimsa. Those are basic values, and they are common in all the religions. And in Ottawa, just before I come to that, I want to say that about peace studies, they are not, since Gandhi's time, they have, peace studies have just totally matured over the past 20 years. I know at the post-secondary level, we have champions like Gene Sharp, Johan Galtung, Glenn D. Page. I mean, they have done immense work, and there have been students who have done their doctorates under them, and they have gone and become teachers like you, and used their work, including Gandhiji's work, and other people who wrote along the same lines, like Martin Luther King, Tolstoy, and each one learning from, everyone learning from the other. What I found fascinating was very interesting, and I thank you for that, because we haven't heard that kind of a exposition on Gandhi's presence in Canada. I had read about Rabindranath Tagore or Vivekananda, going through that, but nobody has mentioned about that Gandhian connection with the Dominion, because his image of model India has been about Dominion India at that time, before Bhagat Singh, before Lala Lajpat Rai was.
Exactly. Before Purna Swaraj.
And then he said, oh, I'm going to go full Purna Swaraj. But prior to that, it was a do. He said, why to have independence? When independence we need is quality of life, removal of poverty, human rights for the things, economic rights for the things. So I'm just saying that the peace studies have evolved, and in Ottawa we have full university devoted to that. At Ottawa U, all courses, the master's level, students coming out from that. So that's the one thing. But the second thing that comes up, as a citizen, both Kuzma and myself, until COVID, for 10 years during the Afghan war, we were very moved by, touched by what we should do as a citizen. What the hell is going on? Why are we there? And we were trying to raise the consciousness. And in Ottawa, we had for 10 years Peace Festival, Ottawa Peace Festival, which was for 12 days, from September 21st to October 2nd. September 21st was the International Day of Nonviolence. Another end was October 2nd, Gandhiji's birthday, International Day of Nonviolence. So those were two bookending. And we had tremendous participation from the citizenry. We had every year about 12 to 20 events, including Judge Saab's Mahatma Gandhi Council bookending that festival. Another citizen involvement was a Department of Peace movement, which we started here and spread all across the country. And we had 12 chapters. And it was great involvement. For almost 8 years, we pursued that dream through democratic means, and a private member's bill in the House of Commons trying to involve MPs, and we went step by step. In the end, we had whatever we have right now, but politics being politics. But that was a conscious raising exercise, what a Department of Peace ought to be. And we were able to mobilize like-minded people across the country. And it was driven, for myself, Gandhiji. Because I was also, like Pradeep there and Yogi, I was saw Gandhi when I was 6-year-old in Birla House.
Birla House, you remember?
Birla House there. And so, you know, when you're in India, there are so many other examples also, personalities. And that sticks with you. And with Kuzma, I've let Kuzma say about how Tolstoy impacted him. And there's that, we are driven by that. I'm sure in this, there are other eminent personalities, you know, who impacted us. So as citizen engagement, that will go on. You know, that will go on. And we came to McMaster, and we spoke to Anne, and Pearson became one of our sponsors of the Department of Peace movement. So sorry.
Just one quick note on that. In Alex's book, you make mention to Gandhi's awareness of the Doukhobor community coming from Russia to Canada, you know, and that was paid for by Count Leo Tolstoy, the great Russian writer. And Gandhi comments on, I remember reading this in one of your chapters on that he makes reference to the Doukhobor community coming.
Doukhobor scholar here.
Yes, yes. Well, we're maybe exhausting our collective patience, but I hope you can stick around. I'm hoping some refreshments have come just one room over, and I hope we can carry on this conversation more informally. But I would ask you all maybe to express our thanks for Alex coming.
Actually, I will just say, I wanted to express gratitude on behalf of the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Council of Ottawa for your talk and rooting the discussion that we had in the history of the relationship with Gandhi and Canada, that we built on since. So Gandhi was aware of Canada, Canadians have been very aware of Gandhi, we're still aware and working with the ideas and how we can move them forward in a constructive way. Learning from the good and the bad all around us. So thank you very much. Thank you, Noel, for situating it very much in the context that we have here and now right today, since the book was written and since the work was done. Really appreciate your thoughts and sort of getting the conversation going. Want to express gratitude for folks engaging in the audience. That appreciate you coming. We do want to continue this discussion with a reception. So please join us. I gather it's in the room next door. So please, I hope you'll join us next door. Thank you.